This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Cabinet Secretary, former State Board of Education Chair, former legislator Phil Kirk, John Hood. Is that a proper enough introduction?
It sounds like I'm a has-been, but that's okay.
John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and former House Speaker and not a has-been, Joe Mavretic.
Oh, are you implying I am?
This show's not getting off on a good foot at all. Last week, for the first time in more than 7 years, maybe longer than that, we were unable to tape a new show for you because of the snow. Well, this week we want to catch you up by reviewing and evaluating the teacher pay proposal put forth by Governor McCrory and legislative leaders. We want to talk about the big coal ash spill and its repercussions and give you our impressions of the Moral Monday March held February 8th. And as always, we'll ask our panel to tell us something we don't know. We've got a full show, so let's get started. Governor Pat McCrory and top legislative leaders announced their plan for raising teacher pay at a joint press conference. At the same moment, the Emerging Issues Forum was talking about teachers. The plan would raise the starting pay for teachers by 14% over 2 years and establish a floor for teacher pay at $35,000 a year by 2016. Reaction from Democrats in the education community was immediate and negative, but Governor McCrory publicly promised this was only a first step and intimated there'd be other announcements prior to the short session in May. Phil McCrory, Speaker Tillis, and President Pro Tem Berger received negative reactions to their proposals, but you wrote an op-ed piece that we published on our website in which you lauded them. Tell us why.
Well, I had the opportunity to go to Ragsdale High School and actually be at the event. And after the event, I wrote something, but then didn't hit the send button. And I only hit the send button after there was so much criticism that I thought was unfounded based on the fact that I heard at least 10 times during the event that it was the first step and only the first step, and that other teachers and state employees would be getting a raise, but they didn't know because the April tax revenues weren't known. So I thought the governor and the Republican leadership are always criticized for not doing anything. Public education received a bad rap. And I think a lot of the criticism, frankly, is very partisan in nature. I said in my op-ed piece, if the governor had offered a $100,000 salary to every teacher, the complaint would have been that it wasn't $105,000. So if this were going to be the only step, I'd give it an F.
Yeah.
But it's the first step.
I'm curious, Phil, with your background on the state board, typically when you make a move like this, there's a quid pro quo. There's some kind of a payoff for the investment. You expect something for the additional outlay of the people's money. I didn't hear anything about that. What do you think we are increasing the investment in K-12 for?
I think we had to, because our starting salary in particular is so low compared to surrounding states, and all salaries have been frozen essentially for 5 years with maybe one small raise. I think there was a real fear, and is a real fear, of not being able to staff classrooms.
I want to get back to the point that you made, John. As far as it goes, my understanding was that these legislative leaders said, we will not announce anything further, particularly because we don't know what the tax revenue is going to look like. But more importantly than that, with NC Tracks being in such a mess, we have no idea in the world what Medicaid expenditures look like for the year. And we can't go out on the, well, the first thing that says we're not going to raise taxes in order to pay teachers. Is that pretty much along the lines of what you understood about this?
Well, yes, they're not going to raise taxes.
Yeah, I got that.
I agree with that. That's a smart move. And it is just the first step of many. The issue of teacher compensation, if you set all the politics and the screaming aside, it has been studied now for many years in North Carolina by an interesting mix of conservative and liberal analysts. And one of the things they absolutely agreed on is that the top priority was to address starting salaries. So if you get beyond all the political nonsense and you look at the actual data, in North Carolina, the first priority was the starting salary. The second priority is going to be how quickly do you get up to the next
Well,
step.
okay, Chris, you were one of the ones that was critical of all of this. Why didn't the governor go ahead and say, okay, here's the first step and here's the next step that we're going to take when we can?
Several things. First of all, he doesn't know the tax revenues now, which is why he said we hear in the show and other places that he didn't announce further raises. And yet he's going to spend $200 million over 2 years. Where's that money coming from? The most likely place is it's money that was set aside in one-time money that wasn't spent, was put in an account, or basically left unspent last year. So now are we being led to believe that we're going to spend one-time money on ongoing salary increases? So that's the first question I have. Does that mean that there's going to be a hole in the budget next year and we're counting on having that money? And the second one is this is the reason I think a lot of people were caught off guard. This is very unusual to announce a budget decision in early February when the session comes back in May.
But he was getting all this pressure about...
So then announce I'm going to have a comprehensive budget and we're going to address teacher salaries and lay it all out there.
He had
in May
said that, but that didn't seem to be enough.
No, he didn't say it. He didn't lay it all out there. He could have waited until March and put a comprehensive proposal and given all teachers some raise. 2/3 of the teachers aren't going to get a raise at all. They're still underpaid. State employees, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, but I think Phil is right about that.
They are going to get a raise. They just don't know how much, and they won't know until May.
Well, why announce it at all? Then why not announce a complete package? I don't understand. It's a political.
Why not announce the major initiative early and talk about it?
You're going to spend one-time money on
and you don't know that it's one-time money. It's the money from
I've
the
lost
growth
control
of
of this conversation. If you notice that, Joe, there's been a lot of talk about raising teacher pay up to the national average. Somebody in a blog that I read not long ago said, do you realize this is the only category of public workers that we even talk about raising them to the national average? What's so important about having the national average with teachers?
Well, I'll tell you what's important about it. We never talk about the real problem. And the real problem in North Carolina with regard to education is we spend half of the general fund for education in the first place. Now, that money comes through revenue. Now, if you spend half of it for public education, I think you have to ask this hard question. What are we getting for it? And what we're getting for it is a national average below for education in North Carolina. So we're spending half of the budget, and the result is below average.
All right, we're running out of time on this segment. We could talk for hours about it, I'm sure. The final question is this, and I want to go around very quickly, yes or no. Are we going to see more teacher pay proposals in 2014? Chris?
I think we will. The question will be how we're going to pay for it and how much they're going to get, and do they address some of the budget cuts that make teachers' jobs harder?
That was more than a yes or no.
Well, too bad.
Yes.
John?
I think there will be yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I want to remind you, NC Spin is now available on most Time Warner cable systems throughout the state, and you can find the channel numbers and times by visiting our website, ncspin.com. You can also watch this show or any recent episode by visiting our website, ncspin.com, or Time Warner on demand. When you visit NC Spin, you can read our weekly column, along with columns from others across the state, and you can give us your opinions. And don't forget, you can find NC Spin on Facebook or at NC Spin Tweets. We look forward to hearing from you. When we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about a coal ash spill.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The slogan on our family farm is growing the next generation. It means using innovative technology to conserve water and increase yields. It embodies our passion for providing food and fiber for our neighbors near and far. It represents our desire to take care of our employees, our land, and to leave a better place for our children. Farm life isn't easy, but it's a good life, and I love what I do.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
We now return to NC Spin.
Bye. On February 2nd, a storm water pipe at a defunct coal-fired power plant ruptured and poured an estimated 80,000 tons of coal ash into the Dan River. Duke Energy issued a public apology and promised to clean up the problems at no expense to ratepayers. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources has been soundly criticized for a too little too late response, for cozy relationships with Duke, and for failing to protect the health and environment. Finally, issuing a warning to citizens not to drink or swim in the water or to eat the fish caught in it. The U.S. Justice Department, meanwhile, has opened a criminal investigation into Diener's handling, hinting that a suspected felony had been committed. And a leading senator is drafting legislation to force Duke to clean up all the 14 coal ash ponds across the state. Question one to everybody. The big buzz is that Diener's too cozy with the companies it's regulating, especially Duke. Critics say the governor worked for Duke for 28 years and that the company's PAC, executives, and families contributed more than $1 million to his campaign. I want you to give your comments on Diener's handling and this issue. And John Hood, I'll start with you.
I think that they are now starting to explain more effectively than they did initially why they intervened in the issues. The environmental groups are going to sue Duke to do something about the coal ash. The state intervened. They had a better explanation, a more complete explanation than they had at the beginning of the story. I actually think the biggest political threat is not to people at Diener, it is not to McCrory, it is not to the legislature. It is actually to Duke itself. I think they have severe credibility problems going into this mess, and they have a lot of work to do to recover.
Phil?
I agree with that. But I would add that Duke has a big credibility problem or challenge. I think they mishandled the first several days. What I don't like about it is that under the Democratic administration, the Republicans accused Diener of being too pro-environment. Now under the Republican administration, you get accused of being too pro-business. It should be right down the middle. It shouldn't be considered on either side. It needs to be more objective and more transparent, no matter who's in charge.
Well, that's interesting because my take on this is that they've been consistent. They've been consistent with Democratic administrations, and they've been consistent with the Republican administration. I mean, think about the Canton water issue. I was up there and saw that brown hole in the river bottom. Think about Harry Payne when he was the Commissioner of Labor. He said many times publicly, look, we're not in the business of fining businesses. We're in the business of trying to help businesses have good safety records. So I think Diener is right in the middle, and I think they're consistent with both kinds of administrations.
Well, I definitely agree Duke has taken a major credibility hit, but I also think the department has made a lot of mistakes. I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions about the way they did try to explain it more this past week, why they intervened in settlements and gave Duke a $99,000 fine, a company that has $20 billion in revenues, and the settlement required them to do basically nothing except pay the fine. I think Governor
They withdrew that settlement.
Well, no, they withdrew one of them, but and they're still trying to figure out what to do after this happened. I think that Governor McCrory's lost some credibility too. This past week he gave a speech in Greensboro and made comments in Greensboro. We should take all this coal ash out of the ponds, put it somewhere else, get it away from the waterways, put it in a place with lined containers, which is what a lot of people think are a lined landfill. Then his office said later, oh no, he meant that was just one of the options. So the governor maybe got ahead of his own department, so I think there's still a lot of questions about this.
So how much of a problem is it that Pat McCrory worked for Duke for 28 years, John?
He can't deny that, and everybody's got to work somewhere.
But he's got to understand that he has to address that. I mean, you have to understand that that's...
I mean, he's addressed it several ways. He can't satisfy.
No, this is have you stop beating your wife kind of thing. You know, I think I go back to PCBs. What we're going to do with PCBs? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do with them.
We dumped them along the side of the road.
No. What we're going to do is we're going to pick them all up and going to take that dirt up and we're going to put it in a landfill that's lined and everything.
But Duke doesn't want to do that, Joe, and neither does the Diener. They said this week they don't want to do that.
Okay, what they said was that while that may work for many or most of the locations, there are a few locations where there may be more danger.
How about this lawsuit? How big a deal is the federal lawsuit? I mean, you've got the Justice Department controlled by Democrats. Now you've got Diener controlled by Republicans. This is all about politics here.
Oh, at the federal level, all about politics, number one, and number two, it's also about the federal camel's nose getting in under the tent for all 48 states that have coal ash ponds.
On the state level, though, Republicans are the ones who, a lot of them are calling, Tom Apodaca primarily, is calling for regulation of coal ash ponds in North Carolina. And look, they've admitted, Duke has admitted that virtually all of their coal ash ponds are leaking and are seeping carcinogens into the groundwater. We've known about it.
So are we going to get legislation?
Do anything about it. Republicans don't seem that interested in the administration about doing something about it either.
Are we going to get legislation?
Well, we better, or more water.
Senator Apodaca says he's going to file a bill.
Horses out of the barn, folks.
So you think it's going to happen?
Well, of course, but you know who gave the permits for those landfills in the first place? It was done lawfully.
Chris said it was equally guilty
Duke
on both
run
sides.
over both political parties, and somebody needs to stand up to them. That's what I'm saying.
After these messages, we're going to talk about the rally in Raleigh.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
You trust your family physician to care for you and your family. We treasure that trust and are committed to providing the best care possible for all North Carolinians. It's time for Medicaid reform, but not without input from North Carolina's family physicians. Medicaid reform will impact health care for all of us. Tell state leaders you want your physician involved. We need Medicaid reform that's good for North Carolina. To sign our petition of support, visit rnchealthcare.com.
With over 30 years of catering experience in the Triangle, why not bring the innovative style of the Irregardless Cafe and Catering to your next event? Our event specialists can assist with the planning of business meetings, cocktail parties, and sit-down meals for receptions and gatherings. We do it all. For your next event and special occasion, contact Irregardless Cafe and Catering.
We now return to NC Spin.
There was a lot of controversy as to the size of the crowd, but there's no disputing the fact that thousands flocked to Raleigh February 8th for what was billed as the Mass Moral March. Led by the state NAACP and others, Reverend William Barber proclaimed they were a trumpet of conscience to protest the actions of the Republican-led legislature and administration. I want to ask everybody, we've had a chance for all the chatter to die down about this event. What, if any, lasting impact do you think it had on our state? Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, I think two things are, this is one of the biggest marches, whatever number you want to arrive at. There were tens of thousands of people marching, one of the biggest marches in Raleigh's recent history. And what made it significant, I think, is that the Democrats for years, and progressives also, have been in their silos and individual issues and never worked together. What you saw if you went to the march was almost every issue, progressive issue across the board. I think the impact will be if those groups continue to work together on some unified strategy to turn things around and change the policy of North Carolina. That will be the lasting impact. We'll see if it happens.
Joe?
Well, I think the 19th century was about slavery, the 20th century was about civil rights, and the 21st century is going to be about character and capabilities. And I think this march really was a look backward. I don't think it's in step with the current moves or waves in American politics.
Phil?
I think it'll have about as much impact as I have on public policy, which is none these days. I mean, I don't think 1% of the people in the march voted for McCrory last time, and Republicans, zero.
And he's going to get about the same number of votes.
Zero will vote for him this time. Get outside the triangle. People don't pay it any attention. So I think no policy will be changed as a result of the march.
John?
I think it was an impressive logistical feat to turn out lots of people in February to march down to downtown Raleigh. It just does. Now, does that translate into the ability to turn out hundreds of thousands of people to vote in November? That is the only thing they're really trying to do here. It's a turnout plan. I don't know that it'll work, but certainly the Democrats, if they're going to get back in the game, they do have to have a strong turnout in November.
Do you agree that was the primary goal of this, Chris?
Well, I think the goal was to draw attention to get people more aware of the things the General Assembly and the administration have done, and hopefully those from their perspective to vote. But I would disagree with Phil. People, there were 300 people in Burnsville this past fall at a Moral Monday event, and Reverend Barber wasn't even there. There was a Moral Monday this past week.
Well, 200 or 300 people in Burnsville are not going to necessarily.
No, my point is that it's hard to get 200 people in Burnsville to do anything. I mean, that's not a big community. My point point is that there are demonstrations. People are unhappy and they're organizing, and they might not have voted for McCrory, but you could have said the same thing about the Tea Party. They didn't vote for Obama. Right. The question is, are the people who are upset engaged, and will they do something? Will they vote? Will they register?
Does it matter? I think that unlike the Tea Party movement, and we don't know, but my suspicion is that lots of people who turned out for these marches are not likely to vote in the fall. The Tea Party movement was based around people who turn out in midterm elections. That's the difference.
There was a lot of noise made during the Moral Monday events about the fact of whether these people were from North Carolina or not. There's no question about the fact that there were busloads of people that came in for the Mass Moral Monday, many of them from out of state. Does it matter whether they're North Carolinians or not, Joe?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's going to come out of this is when you look at this broader umbrella and you look at, let's say, who sponsored the very good commercial signs, that you're liable to see agencies and activities that we don't like.
I want to move. I'm sorry, I'm in charge of this program.
Fine, then I'll just let Joe say something.
I want to dovetail over to something that also happened this past week. I'm sorry to put you down, but that's just the way this is. The firing of the executive director of the Democratic Party of North Carolina, because I think there is some correlation here. Do we know the reason for this firing, and what was this all about, and how's this going to affect Democrats in the election? Joe, you ran for office.
Well, when I ran for office, I distanced myself from the party headquarters and stayed within the Democratic organizations in my counties.
Chris, what's your take on all that?
My take is that there are big fundraising efforts outside the Democratic Party, and in North Carolina and in many other states, some states it's Republicans, some states it's Democrats. Political parties are not as important as they used to be.
Okay. Phil?
It's inside politics. I don't think the average voter knows or cares. I think the Democratic Party's been neutered.
So there's been a lot of hubbub about it, but it's not a big deal?
Very quickly, the dispute was about how much of the effort for Democrats in 2014 is about reelecting Kay Hagan and how much of it is directed at races down the ballot. The perception was that the current members, the previous leadership, was all about Kay Hagan, and that's really what the dispute was about.
All right, after these messages, we're going to get the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
It's true. Farming is different than it was 50 years ago. We know consumers have questions about how our food is grown today. North Carolina livestock farmers want you to know that they're using the most responsible and caring farming practices to feed our state.
NCAnimalAg.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, one of the favorite parts of the show that you tell me about when I see you on the street is this next segment called Tell Us Something We Don't Know. The panelists get to choose a topic and sound off on it for a few seconds. So, Joe Mavretic, we'll start with you. Tell us something we don't know.
This year, 2014, America unequivocally changes from a democracy to a social democracy. In conversations, political, with foreign affairs, in education, even social discourse. If you want to be accurate about America, you have to say that America is now a social democracy. We are becoming a lot more like the Western European nations and Canada than the country that separated itself from England.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
Filing for offices, all offices, end this coming Friday, February 28th, and there's widespread speculation that one urban state Republican senator has filed only to keep other people from filing, and will step aside near the last few days of filing and allow another Republican to run for his seat.
Fascinating. You're not going to mention a name?
I'm not.
Wow. John, tell us something we don't know.
There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of desire, but Democrats will find it very difficult to make large legislative gains this year. That's why some of them decided that where they really want to make a breakout in 2014 is to win some county races. Wake County, Guilford, several others. that have recently turned Republican. The Democrats are going to try to take those county commissions back and then say, see, this is a sign of things to come in 2016. There'll be significant resources devoted to these efforts.
Phil, tell us something we don't know.
The governor's education advisor has spent a lot of time talking and listening to teachers and superintendents and business people, and he's going to be doing more of that in the next couple of months and working with legislative leaders. It's going to be a little more difficult to get a unified approach on some other education issues than it was on the teacher pay issue.
Are you going to tell us what to expect so far as what he's going to recommend?
I don't think they know for a variety of reasons.
All right, so he's just going to be listening.
No, they'll have recommendations, but okay. I'm not involved in it.
You said the education advisor is going around listening to people. Yeah. All right,
and coming up with a plan. And I'm just saying it'll be a challenge to get everybody to sign off on it, unlike on the pay increase.
Are we going to expect some action in the short session?
There
Absolutely,
will be some action,
yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, read our weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when we take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.